The story begins in memory of Amos Tversky, a brilliant mind whose partnership with Daniel Kahneman changed our understanding of how we think. Their collaboration was not just productive but joyful, marked by lively debates and a shared curiosity about the quirks of human judgment. Together, they explored why even experts make predictable mistakes and how our minds often rely on shortcuts that can lead us astray. Their work laid the foundation for what would become a revolution in psychology and economics, showing that our decisions are shaped by more than just logic. They're influenced by hidden biases and intuitive leaps. Why do we care about how people judge and decide? Because our daily lives are filled with choices, big and small, that shape our futures. Kahneman hoped his work would enrich the way we talk about decisions, especially in those everyday moments at the office water cooler. We're quick to spot others' mistakes, but slow to notice our own. By learning the language of judgment and bias, we can become better at understanding not just others, but ourselves. The goal isn't to criticize, but to improve how we think and act, both at work and at home. Just as doctors use precise terms to diagnose illnesses, understanding judgment requires a richer vocabulary. When we can name a bias, like the halo effect, where a confident speaker seems more credible, we're better equipped to recognize and counteract it. Systematic errors or biases aren't random, they show up in predictable ways. By learning these patterns, we can anticipate mistakes before they happen, making our thinking more accurate and our decisions more reliable. Most of us believe we know what's going on in our minds, but much of our thinking happens automatically, outside our awareness. Impressions, intuitions, and even many decisions arise silently. You might sense a lamp on your desk or irritation in someone's voice without knowing how you arrived at that conclusion. This automatic mental work is powerful, but it's also where many of our biases live. Recognizing this helps us appreciate both the strengths and the limits of intuition. Focusing on errors doesn't mean people are irrational or unintelligent. Most of our judgments are appropriate, and intuition often serves us well. But sometimes, we're confident even when we're wrong. An outside observer can often spot our mistakes more easily than we can. The aim is to improve our ability to recognize and understand these errors, so we can limit the damage they cause and make better choices. The journey began in 1969, when Kahneman invited Tversky to speak at his seminar. They debated whether people are good intuitive statisticians. Their answer: not really. Even experts, including themselves, were prone to overestimating the reliability of small samples and making poor judgments about evidence. This realization sparked years of collaboration, leading to groundbreaking studies that revealed just how widespread and systematic these errors are. Kahneman and Tversky's partnership thrived on curiosity and humor. They invented questions, tested their own intuitions, and found that their mistakes were shared by others. Their research was a conversation, full of small experiments and surprising discoveries. They realized that our intuitions are often guided by resemblance to stereotypes, leading to predictable errors in judgment. Heuristics are mental shortcuts we use to make judgments quickly. For example, when asked if Steve is more likely to be a librarian or a farmer, most people rely on resemblance to stereotypes, ignoring statistical facts. This reliance on heuristics leads to biases, systematic errors that can distort our predictions and decisions. Recognizing these shortcuts helps us understand why we sometimes get things wrong. Another powerful shortcut is the availability heuristic, judging the likelihood of events based on how easily examples come to mind. If we can quickly recall instances of something, we assume it's more common. This can lead to overestimating dramatic or well-publicized events, while underestimating less memorable but equally important issues. The media plays a big role in shaping what's available in our minds. Kahneman and Tversky's research stood out because they included the actual questions they asked participants. This allowed readers to experience their own biases firsthand, making the findings more memorable and persuasive. Their approach encouraged scholars from many fields to question the assumption that people are always rational and logical. The ideas of heuristics and biases quickly spread beyond psychology, influencing fields like medicine, law, finance, and military strategy. For example, the availability heuristic helps explain why some public issues get more attention than others. The media's focus shapes what we remember and what we think is important, often at the expense of less dramatic but critical topics. Success in science, as in life, often depends on luck. Kahneman and Tversky's choice to use demonstrations made their work more influential than they could have imagined. Their story is a reminder that small decisions can have big consequences, and that chance plays a role in every achievement. After their work on judgment, Kahneman and Tversky turned to decision-making under uncertainty. They explored how people make choices about risk, like whether to accept a bet. Their research revealed that our intuitive preferences often violate the rules of rational choice, leading to the development of prospect theory, a cornerstone of behavioral economics. For 14 years, Kahneman and Tversky enjoyed a collaboration that was greater than the sum of its parts. Their partnership produced work that would eventually earn a Nobel Prize, an honor that Kahneman received in 2002, and which Tversky would have shared had he lived. Their story is a testament to the power of intellectual friendship and shared curiosity. This book isn't just a history of early research. It presents a modern view of how the mind works, drawing on recent advances in cognitive and social psychology. We now understand that intuition can be both flawed and marvelous, and that expertise often comes from practice rather than shortcuts. Skill and heuristics are both sources of intuitive judgment. Stories of expert intuition, like a firefighter sensing danger or a chess master spotting a winning move, seem magical, but they're not. Experts recognize familiar patterns through experience, allowing them to act quickly and accurately. Intuition is really just recognition, built on thousands of hours of practice. Not all gut feelings are reliable. Sometimes, professionals make decisions based on feelings rather than facts, like an investor buying stock because he likes the company's cars, without considering whether the stock is a good value. This is an example of the affect heuristic, where emotions guide choices with little reasoning. When faced with a tough question, our minds often substitute an easier one without realizing it. For example, instead of asking, "Should I invest in this stock?" we might unconsciously ask, "Do I like this company?" This substitution is at the heart of many intuitive heuristics and explains why we sometimes make choices that don't align with our goals. Our minds operate in two modes, fast and slow. Fast thinking is automatic, intuitive, and often unconscious. Slow thinking is deliberate, effortful, and logical. Psychologists call these System 1 and System 2. Most of our daily actions are guided by System 1, but System 2 steps in when we need to focus, solve complex problems, or override impulses. System 1 operates quickly and effortlessly. It helps us detect emotions, recognize patterns, and make snap judgments. These abilities are often accurate, but they can also lead us astray, especially when we rely on stereotypes or ignore important facts. System 1 is always on, shaping our perceptions and reactions. System 2 is responsible for deliberate, logical thinking. It kicks in when we solve math problems, make complex decisions, or need to focus our attention. System 2 is slower and requires effort, but it's essential for tasks that demand concentration and self-control. However, it's also lazy, often accepting the suggestions of System 1 without much scrutiny. System 1 helps you detect hostility in a voice or answer simple math like 2 plus 2. System 2 is needed for tasks like multiplying 17 times 24 or comparing the value of two washing machines. While System 1 is always running, System 2 steps in when we need to focus, follow rules, or make deliberate choices. We have a limited budget of attention. Trying to do too many demanding tasks at once leads to failure. For example, you can't solve a tough math problem while making a left turn in traffic. Our brains allocate attention to the most important tasks, but this means we can miss obvious things, like the famous invisible gorilla experiment, where people focused on counting basketball passes often miss a person in a gorilla suit walking through the scene. Intense focus can make us blind to unexpected events. The invisible gorilla experiment shows that when we concentrate on one task, we may completely miss something obvious. This illustrates two facts. We can be blind to the obvious, and we're also blind to our blindness. Recognizing these limits helps us understand why we sometimes overlook important details. System 1 continuously generates impressions, intuitions, and impulses. Most of the time, System 2 adopts these suggestions with little modification. But when System 1 encounters difficulty or surprise, System 2 is mobilized to provide more detailed processing. This division of labor is efficient, but it also means that System 1's biases can slip through unless System 2 is vigilant. System 1 is excellent at what it does, but it has limitations. It can't be turned off, and it struggles with logic and statistics. Sometimes, it answers easier questions than the ones it's asked, leading to errors. Recognizing these limits helps us know when to rely on intuition and when to engage more deliberate thinking. Sometimes, System 1 and System 2 come into conflict. For example, when reading a list of words and being asked to name their position rather than read them, your automatic response interferes with your intention. Overcoming this conflict requires effort and self-control, highlighting the role of System 2 in managing impulses. Just as our eyes can be fooled by visual illusions, our minds can be tricked by cognitive illusions. For example, the Mueller-Lyer illusion makes two equal lines appear different in length. Even when we know the truth, our perception doesn't change. Similarly, cognitive illusions can persist even when we're aware of them, reminding us to be cautious about our intuitions. Because System 1 operates automatically, it's hard to prevent errors of intuition. Even when we know a bias exists, avoiding it requires effortful monitoring by System 2. Continuous vigilance isn't practical, so the best we can do is recognize situations where mistakes are likely and try harder when the stakes are high. System 1 and System 2 aren't real entities in the brain, but they're useful ways to describe how we think. Talking about these systems helps us understand the different modes of thought, automatic versus effortful, and makes it easier to discuss the quirks of judgment and decision-making. System 2's defining feature is effort. It's lazy by nature, often letting System 1 take the lead. But some tasks, like self-control and complex reasoning, require System 2's full attention. When we're tired or distracted, System 1's impulses are more likely to guide our actions, sometimes leading us astray. Research shows that mental effort can be measured physically, like the dilation of pupils during tough tasks. When we tackle demanding problems, our bodies respond with increased heart rate and tension. This shows that thinking hard isn't just a mental activity, it's a physical one too. People naturally gravitate toward the least demanding way to achieve a goal. This law of least effort applies to both physical and mental tasks. As we become more skilled, tasks require less effort, freeing up attention for other things. But when we're overloaded, our performance suffers, and we're more likely to rely on shortcuts. Self-control and cognitive effort draw from the same pool of mental energy. When we use willpower in one task, we have less left for the next. This phenomenon, called ego depletion, means we're more likely to give in to temptation or make poor decisions when we're tired or distracted. System 2 often accepts the first answer that comes to mind, especially if it seems plausible. For example, the bat and ball problem tricks many people into giving an intuitive but wrong answer. Overconfidence in our intuitions is common, and avoiding mistakes requires active checking, a task that System 2 is often too lazy to perform. Failing simple reasoning tests isn't usually about ability, but motivation. Most people can solve tough problems when they try, but often settle for the first answer that feels right. Those who are more engaged and skeptical of their intuitions tend to make fewer mistakes and show greater rationality. Intelligence and rationality aren't the same. High intelligence doesn't guarantee immunity to biases. Rationality involves being willing to question intuitions and check answers, while intelligence is about processing information efficiently. Some people are more rational, others more impulsive. These differences shape how we think and decide. System 1 works by associative activation. One idea triggers another in a spreading cascade. For example, seeing the words bananas and vomit together creates a vivid, automatic reaction. These associations shape our emotions, memories, and even physical responses, often without our awareness. Priming is when exposure to one idea makes related ideas easier to access. For example, thinking about eat makes you more likely to recognize soup. Priming can influence not just thoughts, but actions and feelings, often without conscious awareness. These subtle cues shape our behavior in ways we rarely notice. Context matters more than we think. Studies show that voting in a school increases support for education funding, and reminders of money make people more self-reliant but less helpful. Even subtle cues, like images of eyes, can influence honesty. These effects are small but real, and they add up to shape our choices and actions. Much of what we do is guided by processes we don't consciously control. System 1 provides impressions and impulses that often become our beliefs and actions. We're strangers to ourselves in many ways, unaware of the hidden forces shaping our judgments. Accepting this helps us become more humble and cautious in our decisions. While System 1 is the source of many rapid and accurate judgments, it's also where most of our systematic errors originate. Its automatic nature means we're often unaware of the biases influencing our thoughts. Recognizing this is the first step toward making better decisions. Throughout the book, Kahneman uses phrases like System 1 constructed a story or System 2 took control. These are shorthand ways to describe the interplay between our automatic and deliberate thinking. By learning to recognize which system is at work, we can better understand our own minds. The ultimate goal is to improve our ability to identify and understand errors of judgment, both in ourselves and others. By providing a richer language and clearer concepts, we can have more intelligent conversations about decisions, learn from our mistakes, and make better choices in the future. Understanding how we think is a journey, one that reveals both the marvels and the flaws of our minds. By exploring the interplay of fast and slow thinking, heuristics, biases, and the limits of attention, we gain insight into what makes us human. The more we learn, the better equipped we are to navigate the complexities of judgment and choice.